Oh, what part?
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today.
Oh, yeah.
We have a fun presentation today. Looking forward to it. Welcome to the May monthly meetup. To the June monthly meeting, I don't know where I've been. We will be recording this meeting and posting it to our YouTube page for further reference. Carolina Graham didn't have any remarks for today, but she's here if you want to talk to her in person. So she's in the back. A reminder that on June 30th, we will be hosting 150 children in the morning out at RB1 and 75 kiddos in the afternoon for Path to Play. And I think we still need 67 volunteers. There will be a 6-station rotation. Bees in Nature, Native Gardens, The Orchard, Purple Monster, which I believe is a Smoothie King health drink stop, and then an I Spy Critters, and a lot more. So please consider if you haven't already signed up for it on June 30th, which is Wednesday, week ago yesterday. Now I would like to invite my good friend and dear classmate, Nancy Wentz, from the class of 2009, to tell us about the Arboretum.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you today, and I'm going to do this very often. And I have to admit, I've not been to a meeting in a long time, so it's so nice to see some of you face to face again. Well, I'm here to talk about the Arboretum. The next one. I brought some pretty pictures later on. Some pretty nice. I think that adjustments here. Thank you very much. Well, I have been, I'm in the class of 2009, which seems like such a long time ago. And at that time, that was a really good year for me because I discovered, first of all, Master Gardeners and went through the class and met some incredibly wonderful people. And then someone, just like I'm standing here today, said, oh, here's some places where you can earn your hours. And one of them is the Dallas Arboretum. And I had visited a couple of times before, but somehow those just, those things just clicked together in my brain. And it's like, this is so good that I can do something. And that's what I've done for the past 13 years. So apparently it must have worked. And I'll tell you from a very selfish standpoint that when I did work on my projects, and I looked at just about everything and worked on a few of them. And the thing about the Arboretum, I think that really got me, I was trying to find a place where I could continue learning. You have this wonderful basic knowledge from Master Gardeners, someplace where I could keep learning and also share it. And with the Arboretum, for me, that's kind of just did it. Because we have, believe it or not, 1 million visitors every year at the Arboretum. And can you believe that? It's just, and I guess just the city's perception of the Arboretum belongs to the city. It's their responsibility to take care of everything, along with the staff and a whole heck of a lot of volunteers. But it's to me, it just worked really well, and to have the opportunity to talk to so many people. I remember at that point in time, the Arboretum wasn't nearly as well known as it is today. And we have, if you remember the Arboretum, you come in and walk early. So, and after a while, you just get to know those people. Volunteers come in at 7, the walkers come in at 7. And after a while, you just kind of get to know each other. And this woman was telling us this really funny story that she lived across the street from the Arboretum, had for like 20 years before the Arboretum was there. And she had some sort of surgery, so her doctor said, you have to get out and walk. She's like, walking Dallas? That's dangerous. I can't be doing anything like that. So I said, well, where do you live? And she gives her address and goes, isn't that like right across the street from the Dallas Arboretum? And she's like, yeah, there's some kind of garden over there. So I couldn't believe that she lived here for so long and didn't even realize this was the Arboretum. So she became one of our walking regulars. We saw her every morning until she healed, and then like she went on to discover other parks and things she wasn't aware of. But that's kind of how the Arboretum was there, but a lot of people just didn't know it was there. So to me, it was kind of gratifying to see that change and see all the people come in. And now we must be on all the tourist stops and the books and the whatever else they give to visitors, because we get visitors from all over the place. Which, you know, that's the second favorite thing for me about here. It's just the people there, wonderful people who work there, who volunteer there, and who come visit. So in any given day, you can meet people from across the U.S., you know, all over the world. And it's I think one of that, what's that saying about if you're a plant person, we all speak really one language. We all appreciate, you know, beautiful things in our gardens, and I think that's really true because you have such wonderful conversations with people. So that's another reason why I've been there such a long time. So I don't want to get too carried away here now, so I'm going to move ahead. So let me tell you a couple things that are big things for us and things that I personally like doing. There's a job we call garden guide, and that's my very favorite thing to do. And basically, and I know many of you have served in that or gone through the training for that, and basically we just answer questions. And you know, the first thing people tell me is, I can't do that. I don't know the answers to all those things. Well, nobody does. You know, that's a good thing about it. We have a plan where if you can't identify a plant, nobody around you can identify a plant, then we have a process where we take pictures and send it to the staff and get back to that person with the name of that plant. And most of the time, they don't really even care. It's just like, oh, it's just one kind of thing. So a garden guide is a very fun kind of thing. The other thing, if you have a job, children, grandchildren, whatever to take care of, the Arboretum has very flexible hours. So we're open 7 days a week, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the garden guide job, you can come out at any time you want. Weekends, weekdays, mornings, afternoons, whenever you want. So it's very flexible. So for that reason, I like it as well. So let's talk a little bit about the garden and sort of what happens in the garden and why I'm here asking for yet more help today. First of all, this picture, can we move it back a couple to the very beginning to what right there? This I'm sure you will all recognize. This is Dallas Blooms, which is our biggest festival of the year. This has been going on now for, gosh, something like 15, 18 years at the Arboretum. It's very, I think something that's definitely just part of the place itself. It's also the most difficult thing we do all year long. Very labor intensive, but hey, it's worth it. Is that not gorgeous? So basically, our staff, the other thing about this is you have to plan really far in advance. So our staff starts planning in June for next year's Blooms Festival. If you look, there's a lot of, there's 500,000 bulbs that we plant. And it's sort of a mixture of different things. There's tulips, there's all kinds of good things you can see in there. So each bed that we have at the Arboretum has what they call a recipe. So it's critical that we have all of these colors that meld together. And if you can look, there's some yellows, some reds, some oranges. There's a swap along the back of that bed, which is just orange. And so the staff plans all of that out. They have some sort of software that they put it into that now says, okay, if you want 100,000 bulbs over here, this is how many, you're going to have to purchase and then plant to get that number and get the look that you're striving for. So it kind of just goes on forever. So in June, they're ordered, they're delivered right around Thanksgiving. And this is kind of a cool thing too. It's one of these climate change things. So we used to, Thanksgiving would come, and the Monday after Thanksgiving, we'd all line up out of the gardens and get ready to start planting like there's no tomorrow. And what our staff figured out, we were planting the bulbs too early. And we kind of got a taste of this several years ago because people always say, what's the best time to come to blooms? And, there is no best time. It's all the best time. But, there are some weeks that maybe the bulbs are a little bit better than other weeks. And they were finding is that if we waited about 2 weeks, they had this funny joke that says, okay, we start planting the day after Thanksgiving, we have to be finished by Christmas Eve, because if we're not, we don't get Christmas, which that was never true. That's kind of how they encouraged themselves to get things done real quickly. So they finally realized that the prettiest part of blooms was about 2 weeks prior to the beginning date that we were telling everyone about. And it was especially true this past year when we had that really late freeze. Many of the places who plant lots of bulbs like we do totally lost their bulbs. But ours, because we planted them earlier, those little flowers were still down in the bulb under the ground. So that kind of slowed them down a bit, but they came out and bloomed like there was no tomorrow. I think this is one of the best blooms we've had in a very long time. So just say this is henceforward, they're always going to plant a little bit now. And so I'm convinced that works better. So in terms of numbers, it's 500,000 bulbs, and those are basically daffodils, tulips, and hyacinths. So we have this recipe that all of these things go into. In addition to this, we have pansies. Pansies have to coordinate with whatever bulbs you're planting there. So we have 75,000 annuals, winter annuals, all just very, very colorful types of plants. And then on top of that, we have the trees we have in the Arboretum. We have lots and lots of fruit trees. And of course, those are all beginning to bloom. And, it's just wonderful. It's beautiful. And it always smells really good too. And then the very last thing, azaleas. We have about 3,000 azaleas now. They just replanted those another time. And, that's how the whole thing, it normally is about 6 weeks, but I think this year we still had some flowers that looked really good, way past the time that they should have been. We were really into about the first week of April before they really kind of all came off the ghost. But it was interesting, very interesting how that happened. Let's see. If I can think of anything else to tell you. The other thing people ask us is how, people come in and they think, gee, I can go to the big box store or nursery, whatever, and I'm going to buy 10 or 20 bulbs. And I'm going to go ahead and plant them, and this is what they're going to look like. No. It doesn't work that way. Basically, to get this look, these are planted on center. And basically, that means they're about 2 inches apart. So they're almost touching each other on the ground when you plant them. But to get this full look, that's really what it takes. It's and all the effort that goes into it as well. And the way we plant this, and don't get too carried away with this, but I think it's an interesting story. So basically, all these beds are clean. Whatever was in them previously, they're all cleaned out. Then they come in and work the soil a little bit. They add all the amendments, of course, to make this type of landscape work. And then we start planting. And we basically have crews that come in. We've got some temps who come in who they work for a company, and this is kind of what they do. And they are so fast. It's amazing. One of these huge beds takes 1 day to do. And that's probably with about 6 or 8 people working. So if you didn't have that expertise and that many people, it would take a long, much longer. So I guess that's another downside of it. But they, I don't know, I think it's beautiful. And then, of course, they stay in the beds until normally about the 1st of April, sometimes March. And then we start pulling them out and come in with the early, late spring, early summer stuff. So it's a labor of love, I've got to tell you. All right, so let's see what we have next. I skipped around a little bit. This is autumn at the Arboretum, and this has gotten to be almost as big as Dallas blooms. We get in 80,000 pumpkin squash and gourds every year. And they come from a little town called Floydada, which is in West Texas. Anyone ever visit Floydada? Wonderful. Apparently, they're really big in high school football. Not quite sure what else you might do in Floydada, but they're always, I guess, winning some big region or state type championship. So that's how most people think of Floydada, but we think about pumpkins. And they also are doing trials and things for pumpkins, so we do things every year. Some of these things are huge. Some of them weigh a ton. Some of them, the Big Macs, which are the big fat little orange ones on the bottom, they have a small forklift that they use to raise them. Most of them are 400 pounds plus, and they're not even that big, they're just really dense. Some of the others, covered squash, which is the one in the front, sort of the blue-gray, you can pick them up, 5 pounds, maybe 10 pounds for a really big one, but I guess that's empty, I guess, inside, except for the seeds, and these Big Macs, I guess, are packed full of whatever. But it's another thing to get these spread out to the park. We have a theme every year, every fall, and it's a big family thing. You think little kids, what would little kids know about pumpkins? But apparently pumpkins are a big deal now. They were telling us some things about pumpkins we didn't know, and the names of them, they all have funny, cute names. So that's a fun thing to do as well. And one more, I think, holiday at the Arboretum. This is also, we've been doing this, I guess, now for about 5 years. Some parts of it before. We have our carousels with the 12 days of Christmas. Those have been around, I think, maybe even a little bit longer. Those are spruced up and fixed a little bit every year. And this is something new. We have a new, this has been, I think this is the 3rd year we'll have it. And it's like a little village, a European village. And each one of them has, is set up like the candy shop, the shoe store, the pharmacy, the bookstore. And it's so cool to have people come in and look at all of this. And they have different kind of hunts where you need to go through and find a red book or a yellow something or other. And the kids truly get into it. We also have Santa. Santa comes to visit us very frequently. And I think we must have one of the best Santas in town. Because some little kids, they've got the Santa thing down. It's almost like, Mom, give me your cell phone. Let me let Santa see what I need here. And that's on my list. It's incredible. And the other kids are kind of like, they're not really into the Santa thing. But this guy, he can handle all of them so well. So when he has a parent or a grandparent with a squirmy little child, and they want, of course, to get a picture with Santa, and you used to sit on Santa's lap. Of course, you can't do that anymore. So they have like a little pillow kind of thing set. So the parent places the child, squirmy child right here, and they turn around and look at him and immediately start screaming. He does the very same thing. It's a funny thing to see because the kid's like, what? By the time they leave, the kid and Santa are best friends, and they're taking lots of pictures, and it's going to be a great memory for when that kiddo grows up, for sure. So, but this is another, the Arboretum is not open for most time. The special events we are in the evening, but not normally, we close at 5. But during the Christmas, during the holidays, we open pretty much 5 to 6, sometimes 7 days a week as the holidays approach. We have 1.25 million lights up in the trees, and everybody can relax. That's not a volunteer activity. We don't have to climb any trees, place any lights, but they've again got crews of people who come in and do that, and they start laying these lights in October. It literally takes them about at least a month and a half to get them all in. It's a tremendous thing, but it's just, I know there's something so different about the Arboretum during the sunshine times and the Arboretum at night. I mean, just totally different feel, look. It's just, I don't know, pretty cool thing. All right, so what else here? A tasteful place. This is something too that I think is new. It's going on its 5th year now. And this added, so I think so much to the Arboretum that we didn't have before. And I don't know, it's just because people are really into the whole foodie thing now, and they haven't been so much before, but this just really works. It's built in a part of the Arboretum that you probably never saw. It was when we had big groups of kids come in, that was their picnic place. So it was just sort of like behind the trees, and no one knew it was there, but apparently it was very usable land. So we built this about 5 years ago. The building itself is gorgeous. This is the test kitchen, and believe it or not, the wonderful, generous people who gave us the money for this test is their last name. So it's ironic that this is our test place. It's almost all glass. You see the garden, we have a primarily vegetable garden out in front of this. And it's just I don't know, it's really just a cool place. I wish I had better words to describe it. But you can walk in and there's always something going on. We have tastings every day, and we have chefs who come up with some traditional things and then some kind of new things. We've had wobbly ice cream, which, believe it or not, wasn't that bad. There's all kinds of things like that. So it's encouraging people to try this and, something that you wouldn't have done before. We have things like floral arranging, and we have horticulture classes. And we have many of our master gardeners from this very speakers bureau to come and present for us. And they are very, well, of course, they're wonderful speakers, very knowledgeable, great to talk to. And some of them now have their own following. As you probably know, the Arboretum is not really good about advertising everything. We always complain that our classes don't get enough emphasis, but it's wonderful having the master gardeners there. And again, they're just a big part of it, and they help to enhance what we've got out there. We also have different types of vegetables out in the garden, and some of them are really unusual types of things. And the other cool thing, kind of like being a garden guy, this is another one of my favorite things to do. Sometimes in the garden, it's kind of difficult to persuade someone to chat with you and, talk about plants for a while. There's something though about vegetable plants. They will confess their sins to you about what they did with their vegetable plants. It's like, well, I went to last week, I went and got my tomatoes, and then I put the plants in the garage. And then I forgot they were there. So I got them out yesterday and I watered them really well. And I've got a plant, it'll be okay, right? Like, well, no. You need to go back and hopefully there's still something, not too late to plant some new tomato plants because those are not going to work. We also had a gentleman, and this sort of kind of turns into, here's a group talking and another group. So you end up with a lot of people just chatting. And one gentleman came in and he kept saying, well, I have just some real problems with my garden. And we kept saying, well, describe it to us. What's wrong with your garden? It's like, I'm trying all kinds of things, nothing works. And, I bought the right plants and I watered enough and it just won't work. So we kept answering questions. Well, he finally fesses up to us that plastic mulch that you get for your kids' playground, he mixed that in with his garden soil. And he kept saying, well, is there some way you can cleanse your soil? No, we're so sorry. We think you just need to start all over again with some fresh soil. But again, it's just so interesting what people come up with. Just really good place. All right, so tasteful place. I think about one more. Trial gardens. This is another fun thing if you haven't discovered them yet. The Arboretum is, I think, the perfect thing for a trial garden. We have, just like we all have at home, we've got the type of soil, got 103 days, weeks in a row. We've got all the, things that makes gardening really difficult. So the Arboretum works, of course, with A&M and with the growers. We work with about 150 growers. They send us new plants that they produce, and we put them in the ground and see what they do. The staff takes data on it. They look at how quickly it grows, if it's a vegetable, how quickly it produces, how much it produces, just pretty much anything you want to know. And all that data is put together and it goes back to the growers, and hopefully they get some good hints on what they need to do to modify their plants or change things up or whatever. We have it's called Field Day, and that's coming up this next week. And next Wednesday, as a matter of fact. And if any of you would like to attend, you're certainly all invited. There is a fee of $25. But all the growers come in and talk about what they've done. The Arboretum talks about what we've done in terms of our gardens, what we planted where, what we changed since the last year. And the growers talk about what they're introducing typically as new plants. And I know, don't lie to me, I know you're all plant nerds out there. And it's so much fun really to see some of the things they bring in. And some of them are still in production. So it's like, okay, we took this, whatever plant, and we,
it's some of the changes they made to them, that there used to be like begonias, and begonias were always one of my, I really like those a lot, because they're beautiful colors, they come in any color you want right now. But the weird thing is the old fashioned begonias, if you remember, when the bulbs, when the blooms were finished, they would just stay on the plant when they were brown, and it didn't make the plant look very pretty. So I don't remember the grower who produces those, but they come up with a way to make the blooms fall off. So these, and they're the big begonias, it's that group of plants. So now if you buy those, they'll bloom and the blooms drop right off, and they're beautiful plants. So it's just some of the things they do to mess with the plant's genetics to make it a little bit better. And I think it's really cool for us too, just to be able to participate in this and see what's happening in the industry. Well, it's I'll admit to being a plant nerd, so I love just walking around out there and see what new colors they're introducing, and you know, just what improvements or changes they've made to it, or something that's totally new to it. So again, just something that's really fun. And I think that's about it. So let me tell you a little bit about those of you who, I see many of you who have volunteered at the Arboretum before, so thank you so much. If you have not yet, I would love to have you come and spend some time with us. I think the Arboretum is probably one of the most flexible and just in terms of your schedule when you can be there. The most difficult thing of becoming a volunteer at the Arboretum is the time it takes from the time you say, hey, I want to volunteer, to the time you're out there doing something. And it's just, I think it's, I don't blame anybody, but it's just the process that's been in place for a long time. And they're, you know, at this point, just don't want to change it. So basically, let's say you say, hey, I'm all excited about this. I want to come volunteer with Nancy and work in the garden. So the very first thing you do is DallasArboretum.org and sign up. And so just sign up and ask you all the usual questions. The bizarre thing is that you will also go through the same check that you did becoming a master gardener as you do at the Arboretum, because of course we know master gardeners in the county, Arboretum is city, so heaven forbid, which my children will be. So you have that time period for going through that process. And then the next thing is there's an orientation session. I think someone decided, you know, a couple of years ago that we've got this huge garden, not huge garden, 66 acres, but it seems like a big garden, but it's a lot of stuff in 66 acres, and 1 million people coming in. So we really need to have all those procedures in place, like if someone falls down, if there's a fire, if there's a whatever might happen, so that all volunteers are familiar with that. So that's basically what the orientation is. Gives you a little bit more information about the Arboretum too. And then the last part of that is deciding what you want to do. I really, as I said, really like the being a garden guide, tram drivers. We have so many people who love to be tram drivers. I myself do not like the idea of getting into a 9-passenger vehicle and having to weave around people who are walking in the garden and what have you. But it is a fun thing, I think, because you know people are like, gee, I get to write on something. So you have your audience on board of the trams, and then you just talk to them about what you're passing in the garden. And it really is, most of the tram drivers have some really good stories too. So again, just add something and something a little bit different that you probably wouldn't do with any of our other projects, I don't think. Let me think what else. We have a children's garden, which I didn't even get to that today, but it's an incredible Rory Myers Children's Adventure Garden. And it's, they have beautiful plants there. They've gotten more outside groups to come in and kind of add on to what they're doing. So we've got the bird people come in, the Dallas Zoo comes in, we've got people who grow specific things that come in, and the kids have the best time. That was one thing, of course, about the whole pandemic. We didn't have any kids there forever. We now have about 10,000 kids that come in. And it was so sad because it was so quiet. We didn't have those little guys buzzing around. But thank heavens we passed most of that, it seems to be. And our lot is filled with the school buses again. And we have the kids back, and they're all screaming and yelling and just having a good time, which is why we're there. Can I ask the questions real quick? Anybody anybody have any questions? Well, if you can't think of any today, my email is n@nance@sbcglobal.net. I'm sure that's on the internet somewhere, but please call me and or send me an email and I'll get in touch with you and answer all your questions. So thank you so much.
That didn't make you want to volunteer, I don't know. But now I'd like to introduce Kevin Overton. He's with the city of Dallas, and he will be speaking to us on the North Texas Air Quality and Climate Community Initiatives. So without further ado, Kevin.
First off, everybody pick up the phone. And see if you can get the map. Now, we're not gonna need that map right now, but we'll talk about it a little later. Yeah, I think that should. Yeah, got it? Okay. All right, go ahead to the next slide, please. This is basically what I'm gonna call the how and why your kind of got off. When I started going through this, I decided this, I would focus in on community care monitoring. So next slide. Let's talk a little about the background down here monitoring. I hope you use this.
Yes, I'm very sorry.
Okay. I was hoping I could get away without it. Not take it off.
You can tell.
That would be easier for
There
me.
you go. Super.
I don't like to stand behind the podium, I'm sorry. So we're going to talk a little bit about the background of air quality and compliance. And then we're going to talk about community air quality and then community air monitoring and questions and answers. Next slide, please. So the Clean Air Act, everybody's heard of the Clean Air Act, right? Clean Air Act was initially in 1971. Okay, I won't ask how many people in the room were around in 1971 that remember that, but I am one of those people. The concept was that in 1971, they set standards for air pollution. So if your air pollution was above this level, it was dangerous. It was hazardous to your health. If it was below a set level, it wasn't. And so the question, and these were the things that they looked at originally: 6 pollutants, total suspended particulate, sulfur dioxide, ozone, lead, nitrogen dioxide, and carbon monoxide. Now, since then, lead has kind of fallen off the radar. Anybody want to guess why? What was in gasoline in 1971? Lead. So now lead has kind of fallen off. It's still important in some specific places. In West Dallas, where there used to be a lead smelter, up in Frisco, there used to be a lead smelter. In those places, lead is still a concern, but it's not really an air pollutant concern. It's more a soil contaminant at this point. Total suspended particulate has since been divided into 2 groups. We have, well, actually 3 groups. We still have total suspended particulate, but now we focus on particulate matter less than 10 microns, or PM10, which is about the width of a human hair, and actually less than the width of a human hair, and then particulate matter less than 2.5 microns, which is very tricky because it can exist as a particle, or it can exist as a vapor. It depends on the conditions, the atmospheric conditions, and everything. But it's very, very small. The idea is that these are the particles that when you inhale them down into your lungs, they can get into your bloodstream, be carried to other parts of your body, and cause other health problems. Ozone, everybody knows about. Ozone actually is what we call is not directly emitted into the atmosphere. Ozone forms in the atmosphere from an atmospheric reaction involving nitrogen dioxide, which is up there, and also volatile organic compounds. It includes heat, it includes sunshine, light winds, the right conditions, and ozone will form. We're in an ozone action day today. I don't know, everybody knows about that, right? So today is a day when it's very hot. There's a lot of cars and trucks on the road that are emitting oxides of nitrogen, or NO2. And the winds are very light, and it's very bright sunshine, a lot of solar radiation. So it's very favorable conditions for ozone to form in the atmosphere. So originally in 1971, they established these standards called the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. And everybody in the country was supposed to be in compliance with these standards by 1975. Didn't happen. The Clean Air Act has been amended twice, in 1977 and again in 1990. They've done tweaks to it here and there since 1990, but no major revisions, mostly for political reasons. Nobody can agree on it anymore. Next slide, please. So in order to establish compliance with these national ambient air quality standards, there has to be some tool to check the levels. And so the EPA created this air monitoring program. Well, in the early 70s, they used 1970s technology. This included devices like this one, which had a motor in it. If it was for particulate, it had a filter, and air was pulled across that filter at a known rate. And then that filter, after a certain period of time, was taken and weighed. It had been weighed before it was put in, and then it was weighed after you took it out. And that's how you determine how much particulate there was. So the trick with this is we didn't really have the ability to know what it was at any one time. We had it over a period of time, usually a week or a month or something like that. So that was an issue. For other pollutants, some of the instruments, I mean, we didn't have a lot of instrumentation back in the 70s. There might have been absorbing solutions in a glass apparatus, and the gas would have been bubbled through that. And then it would have been taken back to the lab, and a chemist would have done a titration on it. So pretty crude technology. But the one thing that they did do back in the 70s that has reaped so much benefits is they put very tight quality controls. They established procedures and techniques that were published in the Federal Register. And in order to do the air monitoring correctly, you had to follow these procedures. You could not deviate from these procedures at all. So the original ones were called Federal Reference Methods, or FRM. And then over time, as new technology became available and new techniques became available, and after a lot of testing and research and development, they decided that these were as good, if not better, than the original techniques. They were called Federal Equivalent Methods, or FEM. Next slide. But kind of just digress for a second. Air monitoring is a systematic way of measuring air quality, the air quality around us over a set period of time to assess pollutants. It helps to determine the extent of pollution. It provides information on air quality. It helps to understand public health issues, and supports the implementation of clean air strategies and other benefits. So if you're in an area that is out of compliance with the National Air Quality Standards for ozone, like we are here, you then have to come up with some kind of a program to get into compliance. And for here, the North Central Texas Council of Governments is in charge of creating that. Well, the North Central Texas Council of Governments and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality come up with a plan to get us into compliance with ozone. And that's called a state implementation plan or SIP on degrees. Next slide, please. So those of us that grew up in the 70s, or came of age in the 70s, know there's been vast leaps in technology. The microchip and the computer basically were game changers. The current FRM and FEM monitors today are very sophisticated, they're very accurate. You can get as accurate results with these things as you can with lab instrumentation. I mean, it's really amazing. Back when I took chemistry in the 70s, you know, a gas chromatograph filled up an entire, like a closet. I mean, it was huge. Now you can carry it around in soup packs or briefcase. So we've made a lot of progress, and we have a lot more instrumentation now. Can you click on that link and bring up that YouTube video? This is like 2 minutes, and I think it will explain. If you can't do it, it's okay.
This is what we call our Dallas Insight.
There we go.
Website, it would be CAMS 401. CAMS is the continuous air monitoring station. This particular station has been. This is what we call our Dallas Hidden Site. And if
What it does, the air will be moved through the cyclone. It's also blown over into the same chamber. Collected. And when it's done sampling, it will be put into the sample chamber. After that, I actually download the data, decipher, analyze some of it, send that data as well as some filters to the third-party lab.
we also do ozone, MOX, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, monoxide. We analyze, it takes air, ambient air from the outside through a filter into the machine, and inside the machine, we've got complex equipment that convert that signal into a number. The city of Dallas actually follows methods set forth by the EPA. So all this equipment you see today, there are certain methods that we follow in order to capture those samples. Pollutants in the air are called long-term health effects. So it's important to know what the quality of the air is in order to protect ourselves. We're actually working with Texas Transportation Institute, which is part of Texas A&M, for studying the air quality for school kids. And we've actually got samples here at this site that will be going out to different schools. And we do all this to ensure that citizens of Dallas will live quality life. The citizens of Dallas can learn more about air quality by going to green-dallas.net. You can also go to the city's website, which is DallasCityHall.com, click up the environmental tab, and we have all the information you need there about what we do.
Okay, that was our air monitoring manager. City of Dallas has several air monitoring stations that we operate under contract with TCEQ. We provide the personnel and the time to go out and do the calibrations and do the things that are required to keep these things running. And the data goes to the TCEQ and it goes into the website. And the last point just is there that the quality assurance protocols, even today, are still very detailed and very rigorous. Next slide, please. Okay, there's limitations to air monitoring. The National Ambient Air Quality Standards are more rigorous now because National Ambient Air Quality Standards are reviewed every 5 years. And if there is scientific data that says that the standard is not as low as it should be, or if it's too high, whatever, then there is a procedure to change that standard. Over time, the standards have changed. The last change was in 2015. Ozone standard was lowered from 75 parts per billion to 70 parts per billion. The original ozone standard back in 1971 was 120 parts per billion. That's what, you know, that's way lower than what we used to do. As the technology has become more sophisticated, the cost is also risen. This equipment costs a lot of money. The equipment that was in that video cost a lot of money. It's because the cost is so high, the amount of that equipment that we can deploy is limited. Okay, and actually, I say we, the city of Dallas really doesn't decide where those monitors go. That decision is made by the EPA and the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So what happens is, what we found is that there are a lot of neighborhoods where we think the air quality is okay, but we don't have any data that says one way or the other. And that's going to get important here in just a second. So next slide, please. These are the air monitoring stations all across North Texas. The little circles indicate the pollutants monitored. The Hinton station that HC was talking about is that colored dot right above the L in Dallas. It's just southwest of Love Field. And the other stations have different monitors. Most of them have one or two things that they monitor. The light blue color is ozone. The yellow, I believe, is meteorological data, because you have to have meteorological data to go with the air monitors. So we operate all those monitors in the city of Dallas, plus the one over in Rockwall. Next slide. These are the ones in Dallas. And kind of the point I want to make here is you can see that there are parts of Dallas that are monitored, but there are parts that really don't. We don't get a lot of data. We don't get a lot of data from over here in southeast Dallas. We don't have a lot of data around I-30 in West Dallas. The purple dot there that says Earhart is Amelia Earhart Elementary School. And they have one of the old particulate monitors there, like I was describing earlier with the filter. So we can get particulate data from that, but it's not current data. It's not live data. Okay, next slide. This is just an illustration of kind of what we're facing. That's kind of want to put back up. You can see that we started, this starts in 1999 to 2001, and our ozone levels, 8-hour average, was around 101. Last year, it was 76. We're supposed to be below 70. This year, as of, what was that, June 6th, it was 74, but that number will go up before the end of the year, we're confident. That it'll be at least 75, probably 76 again. Because every time we have an ozone action day, every time we have an ozone exceedance, it goes into that mathematical formula that calculates that average. Next slide. So we kind of have a new approach to air monitoring now. It's based on technology that allows us to have smaller, much cheaper sensors that we can deploy in the field. It's not as accurate as the federal reference methods or the federal equivalent methods. It is much less expensive. It is much less manpower, and it works. And we can collect the data using cellular technology. So we can gather it all in. We don't have to have somebody there data, like Christy when she was there downloading that data from that PM monitor. We call this a community approach. The illustration over there is a monitor called AQ Mesh, and I am in the middle of trying to purchase 24 of those to spread around the city of Dallas. I'll talk that here in a minute. Well, next slide, please. Those are our existing locations. We call our project Breathe Easy Dallas. And the first phase of it was we deployed 9 monitors at schools around Dallas. park near schools. It wasn't on the school property. Put them on flasher poles. So when you went through the school zone, you had the flasher pole. We put the monitors there. We had a solar panel that charged the battery, and the battery ran the monitors. Big success, but it was early on. We selected the schools based on the rates of asthma in the neighborhoods. We worked with Parkland and Children's and some other health organizations, and we collected asthma data. So we put some monitors at schools that had high poverty, high asthma, some schools that had low poverty and high asthma, and some schools that were basically neutral as a control. And so part of this project is to compare all the data from a year of monitoring from those different monitoring stations. We're working with the Texas Transportation Institute down at Texas A&M, and they are in the middle of completing that analysis now. They keep telling me they're going to have it to me next week. It takes time. Next slide, please. So, like I said, Breathe Easy Dallas. Phase 1 was this project that I described earlier. The other major partner in that project was the Nature Conservancy. They were actually the ones who went out and found grant money to enable us to do this. It was a great partnership. I loved working with them. But this next phase, well, I think I've already covered all that. Go ahead. Oh, and there's where the pictures that we're installing on the monitors. You can see it's on flash or pole. I think there's some other pictures here in a minute. Next slide, please. We have gone out and gotten additional grants. One of them is a EPA State Environmental Justice Grant, and the other is an ARPA grant. And the State Environmental Justice Grant is very specific. We're going to put 5 monitors in West Dallas, 2 zip codes in West Dallas. And it was actually started back during COVID. And the idea was to see if there was a relationship between COVID and air quality. Well, the COVID thing is kind of gone by now. So it's still a good project, and we're still going to look at the air quality in that West Dallas area, mostly in north and south of I-30. And there's a lot of things of interest over there. There's some very large industrial facilities. There's a GAF that manufactures shingles. There are any number of concrete batch plants. And there's also, if you've ever noticed, a lot of warehouses popping up. Now, the thing about those warehouses is they kind of fly under the radar because they have diesel trucks. And those diesel trucks come into those warehouses, and they will sit there and idle until it's time for them to go drop off or pick up their load. And sometimes at some of those warehouses, it may be for long periods, they may be idling for long periods of time. If you've ever driven down I-20 in Southeast Dallas over by the Amazon warehouse that's over there, they will be lined up on the service road to I-20 for about a mile, just sitting there idle. So that's something, you know, that's air quality that kind of nobody's really looked at. So we kind of want to take a look at that. The ARPA grant is for 24 of the basic monitors, which we're calling type 1, like I showed you in the other slide. But we're also going to get 6, what we're calling type 2 monitors, which is sort of in between those basic monitors and the FRM monitors. They not quite as accurate, but they're more accurate than the type 1s, and they will do some additional pollutants that the type 1 monitors won't do. So those are going to probably be, we haven't really purchased those yet or had the bids out to purchase those yet, but we're going to be placing those in very specific locations. We also have plans for a mobile unit, hopefully. That's going to be, Houston has one of those, or Harris County has one of those. And that's very helpful in emergency situations. If there's a spill or an industrial accident, you can go park this van and it will tell you the air quality in real time downwind of where the accident took place. And yes, ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, so you'll have your type 1 and type 2.
But we'll have 29 of the top one with the 2 grants, plus 9 more from the original. So a total of 38.
But you'll have 4 different types.
Well,
Type 1 to type 2.
the FRM FEM is going to be a different group. That will be, that will still, that the group that does that, that's all, they're going to keep doing those.
That will still be in place.
Yes, ma'am, those will still be in place. I thought you were asking about manpower, so. But no, the air monitoring group is under contract to TCEQ, and they have to account for their time in their contract. So they can't go out and do this other stuff, which is non-regulatory. So that falls on my group. Next slide. So here's some of the partners. EPA, of course, is providing a grant. Positive Breathing is a very nice, neat group that actually does works with childhood asthma. It's a nonprofit. They have some mobile units, and they will actually go to schools in high asthma areas and will do treatments. The lady that runs it, his name is Shamar Norris. If you ever get a chance to meet her, she's a wonderful lady. She is really dedicated, and I really appreciate what she does. Parkland and Children's Health both have public health groups that we're working with. West Dallas One's Neighborhood Association, they're working with us over in the West Dallas community. There'll be other community groups in the other areas as we get into those. And the last group there is CAR-T, and I can't tell you what CAR-T stands for, but that's a organization that the Texas Transportation Institute belongs to. Yeah, oh, is it up there? It's a consortium of universities. I believe Georgia Tech, A&M, Arizona State, and one of the California schools, University of California schools, and they all have groups dedicated to air pollution and environmental studies. So we're going to be working with this. Next slide. This is the question now becomes, where do we put these monitors? And so we start looking at things with some factors about where these monitors need to go. This is a online tool called EJ Screen, or Environmental Justice Screen, from the EPA. This was a map that we created for a community meeting over in West Dallas, where we were showing the concentration of industrial facilities and air pollution sources over there in that neighborhood. So you can see there's probably a need for some monitors to find out what's going on in the neighborhood. Next slide. That is basically is showing vulnerable areas based on data that we have. It's interesting information, but let's not get into that too much. Next slide. All right, so as we get into this block grant, which is the first one that's going to go be implemented here, or the next one to be implemented, it has certain requirements that we do. We have to do regular communications with the West Dallas community. We've had one round of multiple public meetings over there at different locations at different times of the day, different days of the week, to get as many people as we can. It's going to install at least 5 community monitors. We're going to share that data. The plan is a website where you can go and download the data and see what it is. Now, I'm not going to promise that it's going to be within an hour. It may be, if you look today, you may see yesterday's data, but it's not because of intent or trying to hide anything. It's because I don't really have the technology or the staff to make it that fast. We're working with public health partners. And the last one there is one of the things one reason I want to go through this is the template we're going to use for all of our monitoring. We're going to work with the neighborhood groups, and we're going to work with the communities and our partners, and all this data is going to be public data. It has to be because we're a public agency. Next slide. Yes, ma'am.
So then, the data that's going to be shared, that's the information that the TCEQ has?
No, it's just going to be different. I mean, it will be the same pollutants to some degree. We're not going to do all the pollutants that TCEQ does. The pollutants we're going to focus on are PM10, PM2.5, nitrogen dioxide, and ozone. And we're also going to try to get some sulfur dioxide data. We may also try to get some volatile organic compound data. But that's all equipment driven. So it depends on the equipment that we can buy and everything. So, but it will be similar data, but what we're getting is non-regulatory. I want to make that really clear. This data that we're getting is for information. It's for evaluating. It's, I'll go over that here in a minute, but it is non-regulatory, so it cannot be used by TCEQ to make any kind of determination. That clear? Okay, I'll make sure. And it sort of describes that. The regulatory monitors like the one on the left, which is at Hinton. The most accurate technology available. You saw how many you saw 2 people there working. Every day there's at least 2 or 3 people there working to do the different instrumentation and everything. It's very labor intensive. But that gives us a big picture. The community monitoring, which that's one of our monitors in that little metal cage right there in the middle, right above the metal box. Those monitors are, like I said, they're low cost. They're about $5,000 each. And they have a solar panel that runs them. Those are for information on local pollution levels. It's going to give us a neighborhood picture. Next slide. And here's my little spiel again. It is not regulatory. I can't say that enough. If we get a data that shows some kind of exceedance, all we can do is investigate further and try to find out what's going on in the neighborhood. We can't do anything related to enforcement or anything like that. The sensors used do not provide accuracy. What we can use it is to direct our resources. So zoning, planning, things like that, we can use this data for those types of applications. Does that make sense? And it's very important that we also use a very rigorous protocol and quality standards for this data so that it's reproducible and that it is controlled. And, we want it to be as scientific as possible. There is a network that you might have heard of called Purple Air. Anybody ever heard of Purple Air? No, Purple Air is a particulate monitor, and you can go online and you can buy one for, I think, about $250, $300. And you take it home and you plug it in and it hooks up to your Wi-Fi and you become part of the Purple Air network. And there's quite a few of them in Dallas around. And when they, and I'll give you an example, on a Saturday morning back in the winter, several of these Purple Air monitors went way high. They're showing really high readings. And my boss called me and says, "What's going on?" And what happened was several activists there, or several community groups, had called her and said they had been looking on this Purple Air monitoring network online, and they saw these high numbers, and she had any idea what was causing it. So she called Kevin and said, "What do you know about it?" Let me look. So I started looking and going through the data that they had, and the only conclusion that I could come up with is that it was a very cold morning. It had been a very cold night. It was a Friday night, and the air monitors that were showing high numbers were all south of relatively affluent communities up in North Dallas. And so my conclusion is that people came home from work, it was a cold night, they started a fire in the fireplace, and we were getting the particulates coming from the roof-party fires. I don't have anything to back that up, but I think it's a pretty good guess. It's consistent with what they've seen in other areas where they have a lot of wood-burning stoves. So, you know, these things can, but my original point on the purple air is the purple air is something you take right out of the box and you use it. We will not do that. Our instruments will all go to our Henry facility before we deploy them in the field, and they will be calibrated against the regulatory air quality so that we can make them as accurate as possible. Most of the sensors have a 1-year lifespan. Towards the end of that year, we will bring them back to Henry and recalibrate them so that we make sure that they're as accurate as possible. Are still showing, and at least we know what happened. It's not reading as well as it should, and at least we know that towards the end of that life cycle that data may be a little bit suspect, and we can adjust it accordingly. Also, if we get one that starts reading really weird numbers, like really high or really low, we have the ability to pull it out of the field and take it back and check it. So it's very important to have quality control on this information. Next slide, please. And I think this is pretty much what I just said. And if it's not consistent, you can't rely on it. And anyway, next slide. So here's some challenges. We want to make sure that we can measure pollutants we're interested in. We don't want to put a PM sensor in a place where we don't think there's PM, but there's ozone, and vice versa. So we want to make sure that we're putting the right sensors in the right places. We want to make sure that they can perform under a variety of environmental conditions. When this sensor technology first came out, there was some instances where some of them were not reading correctly when there was high humidity or high temperatures or low humidity, low temperatures. Various environmental things could influence the reading. Most of that's been fixed, hopefully. Want to make sure that there's not interference between the sensors. Sometimes different pollutants will interfere with one pollutant will interfere with another. Ozone and NOx is a good example of that. Sometimes the sensors have a tough time differentiating between the two. And how does it change over time? Does it drift? And finally, their performance out of the box, which I just talked about. We want to make sure that there's any corrections or anything we have in these before we deploy them in the field. Next slide. The regulatory monitors, the community monitors, and skip that slide. This is easier to read. So here's what we're looking at. The level 1 monitors will do temperature, humidity, ozone, nitrogen dioxide, PM10, PM2.5. The level 2 monitors, we can add TSP, sulfur dioxide, VOC, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. Regulatory monitors will do all those plus hazardous air pollutants, specific hazardous air pollutants, and lead. So we're getting there. We're not quite all the way to the regulatory level yet. Next slide. This is just an illustration of how difficult it can be to decide on sites. These were all the different sites that we looked at for the initial phase of releasing Dallas. The different schools, the things that we looked at. And so you can see it's quite complicated when you start deciding where to put these things. Next slide. Some of the things that we have to consider when we locate these monitors is the general location, access. We want to put it someplace where it's secure. But we don't want to put it someplace so that if we get a call in the middle of the night that it's not working correctly, that we can't get to it. In other words, we don't want to put it somewhere where it's locked up, you know, maybe behind a fence or something, but we don't have the key, so we have to take that into account. Power, some of the level 2 or type 2s will require 110 power. The level 1s, we're going to make sure that they can all run on solar, so that doesn't become such an issue with the more advanced model. These things are going to run on cellular communication, and as we all know with our phones, there are dead spots where you can't get cellular data. So, so we have to make sure that works. Security again, placement. We want to try to put these things about 6 foot high, maximum, because that's what we breathe. Okay, that can be as low as 3 feet, high as 6 feet, and there may be places where they have to go higher because of security. We will take pictures and document the locations, and then we'll all go online, and then we'll document all the information about the site. Next slide. This is outdoor air quality. We're not trying to do indoor air quality. We're going to consider transportation corridors when we place these. Some of them will go in our near corridors. Some of them will want to put away from corridors. We want to put them away from certain sources that are not a threat, but they can cause reasons. A vent for a restaurant, you know, a place where a facility where a designated smoking area where smokers go out and smoke. Those kinds of things will skew our data. That's not what we're trying to capture. We're trying to capture ambient data. Next slide. The other thing that we have to look at is what we call downwash. If you've ever walked downtown on a windy day, you know that when you're in the downwind side of a building, you don't get much wind. But when you walk in between 2 buildings, you get that slipstream effect where the wind is higher than it would be if you were out in an open area. We want to avoid things like that. And those kinds of things, we can predict where they are mathematically and look at them. It's something that we want to take into consideration. Next slide. Community input, logistical input, proximity to sources of pollution, proximity to major roadways, and scientific control. That basically sums up my criteria or my things for location. Next slide. So now you're probably curious about how soon all this is going to happen. The original monitors for the original DC Dallas are offline right now. They are due for new sensors. They have their lifespan. The sensors have reached the end of their lifespan. So we pulled them out, and we're trying to get sensors ordered. You know, we're at the mercy of the supplier on those, and we're working with the guys at Texas A&M Transportation Institute. They're actually doing the maintenance on those, so those should be deployed back soon. The others, we have awarded a contract for the type 1 monitors. We are in the process of purchasing those monitors. You think when you have a contract, it would be easy to purchase, but you obviously don't work for the city. There's a lot of procedures you have to go through, and you have a lot of signatures you have to get. So it's taking a little bit of time. Once we get those purchased, the supplier and the vendor who got the contract, that's going to take about 6 weeks to get them to us. Hopefully the purchase goes in tomorrow or early next week, that close. And so about 6 weeks from now, we should be getting those monitors. We'll get those monitors assembled, get them out to Hinton, and start their on their calibration process, which will be anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And then we will start installing the monitors at the locations that we've decided on by then. And we'll start doing the baseline run for a couple of weeks before we start recording the data to make sure everything's working the way it is supposed to. And then we'll start collecting the data hopefully by late summer. It's been a long ride. Next slide. So what are we going to do with all this? Well, we're going to share it with the community. A lot of people want to know what the air quality is like in the community, especially people who live in communities where they're exposed to things like GAF or batch plants or all kinds of other industrial facilities. Those people want to know what the air quality is in their neighborhoods. Now, does that mean that the air quality in their neighborhoods is bad? No, it doesn't. It may be perfectly fine, but they have a right to know that. I mean, you know, we have a right to know what we're able to breathe. So I think most of these are going to show that our air quality is generally pretty good. There may be specific moments in time when it degrades, but I think overall it's going to show that it's pretty good. But we need to document that. We need to be able to sit right now. Somebody says, "What's the air quality in my neighborhood?" I don't know. I don't have any data that shows what it is. There's studies. I think the people that Park Wind did a study where they looked at some statistics and some different things. But I mean, it's guesswork. It's educated guesswork. So let's find out what's really going on. When we find something, and we will find some things, we can use it for new strategies for air pollution. Batch plants. We can't put controls on batch plants. That's the TCEQ's job. They say what controls they have to have. We can't do permits. What we can do is zoning. And we can say that if you're going to put a batch plant in, you have to have a buffer. It can only go in a certain zoned area, and we can do things like that. That's our ability as a city. Same thing with identify and mitigate local pollution exposure. And overall, the bottom line is we're working to improve health outcomes. We're trying to make Dallas a healthier, safer city. Okay, next slide. Next slide. I think that's it. So there's my email address, except it's now dallas.gov, it's dallascityhall.com. I didn't notice that when I was doing it. And I'll put that slide in. It's easier to get me on my cell right now than it is my office number because I work from home a lot. So if you call me on my cell. But I'll be glad to talk to anyone. And if you live in a neighborhood where you think there needs to be some air monitors, let me know. Call me or email me. Let me know. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about both field.
Yes, ma'am.
2 parts. One are the monitors around the field, and 2, we've been talking about expanding that. We expect that to change.
The monitors that I said were near Love Field, they're probably a couple of miles away. So it's in the area, but it's not close enough that it should be impacted.
And the expansion, you think that?
No. They are more west and southwest, and the prevailing winds are southeast. So anything from Love Field is probably going to get blown to the northwest and not. It would be really rare if it was blown to the southeast, to the southwest. Yes, ma'am.
The community monitor that the emergency community drive the van over.
And a community monitor that is high, can you drive the van over and get a regulatory reading from the van?
The van will be the same type of monitoring equipment. It won't be regulatory monitors. If we have something that's consistently showing high numbers that we think there needs to be, we would have to go through the TCEQ and the EPA and ask them to put the lots of the regulatory monitors there. That would be, well, but I mean, that can be done. We got one of those monitors that was on that map for Dallas that's just southeast of downtown. That is a new monitor. That wasn't there a year ago. It's been there for a couple of months now. We got them to put that monitor there because we felt there was a need for it in that location. Can you go back to the original slide, the slide that had the QR code, and click on that link? I want to pull up and show you a couple things about that.
Do you have any scientific monitors that are actually in a forest?
Not at the moment. That's a good question. I mean, there's some interesting questions in that. I don't know that we will be able to do that this round because I think the priority is more placing them in industrial areas. But that's an interesting question. Okay, so if you can click on that link at the top, we can pull up that map and show it on the screen. And I'll kind of give you a little hint about what that does. And then I'll shut up. I'll pause. Okay. The fuzzy blue dots are major industrial sources in Dallas. If you can put your cursor on one of those, it should pull up some information. You can do it on your phone. And it'll show you what that plan is. That is based on EPA data or it's based on emission inventory data. Every year, a major source has to do an emission inventory and report it to the DCMGA, and then that data gets reported online. So we have that data on this map. The other thing we have on this map are schools, batch plants. The little black symbols are batch plants. Batch plants are hard to keep track of because they get permitted by a different process. They get permitted, they get what's called permit by rule, which is really just a registration. Some of them are temporary, so that they will go to do some specific job, like a new road or something, and then when that job is done, they'll move it somewhere else. So some batch plants are hard to keep track of. The other thing on that is fire stations and schools, and we put those up there because, well, obviously schools are what we call sensitive receptors, where the kids could be exposed to pollution. And fire stations and the parks that we have up there are useful because those are city owned property and those may be good locations for monitors. Or if you will go to, yeah, if you go to the three lines up there on the top, blue, you should be able to select schools. Oh, okay, I guess they took schools off. Okay, sorry, I thought schools were on here. I guess they took them off. Now this is kind of our base map, and hopefully, what I'm hoping that we can do is that we can use this map when we start to when we decide on locations, and we'll have symbols for the monitors up there. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to use the same technology so that when you click on one of the monitoring stations, it will take you to the data for that monitor. Yes, ma'am.
You can select schools by pressing this and then selecting current schools.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was on there.
This and then view the list of what you can see.
Ah, I see. Thank you.
All right.
IT class.
Yes.
My son makes fun of me all the time. Because I don't do, he does, and the young lady that used to work for me, she would do everything on her phone. And I'm like, how do you do that?
Thank you for coming today. It was a fascinating.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Question though, I pulled up about a half dozen of the blurry blue spots that are the industrial locations, and looked at the data for those, and they're all showing reporting year 2020.
That's the last year available, the last data year available.
And is that because we're waiting on the calibration of the sensors?
That's, no, that's the data. We're getting that data from TCEQ.
Oh, that data, okay.
And so it has to, TCEQ has to post it before we can use
That
it.
takes 2 years, over 2 years?
Well, I mean, it's 2021, this is 2022.
2020.
2020, so yeah, it takes about that long because it's not due until, it wasn't due until, the report's not due at the end of the year, it's due like mid-year of the next year. And then there are so many sources in Texas that it's TCEQ.
Thank you.
I can't be responsible for their schedule. Yes, ma'am. We'll walk back to your, I'll meet you halfway, how's that?
Wondering where all of us have that weather information in our phones, and they always come up with the information, moderate, unhealthy, this and that. Where do they get that information? Or is this not up to date?
So that data is up to date. That data comes from those air monitors that we talked about, the federal reference monitors, the ones that are spread all over North Texas. They collect that data. There's a nationwide network of those air monitors. If you want to find out more about that, go to a website called airnow.gov, and they have all the information on how they do that. It's really a fascinating process, and it's very complicated. All right, I got a question. How many tomato gardeners in the room? Are you guys having any luck with tomatoes this year?
Yes.
I mean, it's so hot that I'm going to get one round of tomatoes and that's going to be it.
A lot of water.
That's a lot of water, you know. Anyway, all right, that was my question. Yes, sir. Different groups in our LEQS and my department is Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. So there are people in my department. We have an urban agriculture specialist, and she works with AgriLife a lot. We also have people whose focus is on sustainability, and they work with them a lot. In my position, which I'm kind of the regulatory internal air manager, I don't work a lot with that group. We do a lot, you know, the city of Dallas has a bunch of tree programs. The main one I'm familiar with that my department works with is Branch Out Dallas, where every year we work with Parks Department, where they have propagated trees, native trees, and then we have a process where on a Saturday at different points from the city, you pre-register and come pick up your tree and take it home and plant it. That's normally in the fall because it's the best time to plant trees. More questions? All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you so much. That brings us to the raffle. Next monthly meeting will be here, right here, on July 28th, 11:30 to 1. And our speaker will be Sam Kishnick from Texas Parks and Wildlife, and he'll talk to us on dragonflies. So who wants to come help me? Nancy, come on up here. The first number is 3113.